Vedas.
The Vedas are a large body of texts originating in ancient India. Composed in Vedic Sanskrit, the texts constitute the oldest layer of Sanskrit literature and the oldest scriptures of Hinduism. The Vedas are apauruṣeya. They are supposed to have been directly revealed, and thus are called śruti, distinguishing them from other religious texts, which are called smṛti. In Hindu tradition, the creation of Vedas is credited to Brahma. The Vedic texts or śruti are organized around four canonical collections of metrical material known as Saṃhitās, of which the first three are related to the performance of yajna in historical Vedic religion. The Rig Veda, containing hymns to be recited by the hota, or presiding priest; the yajna Veda, containing formulas to be recited by the advaru or officiating priest; the Sama Veda, containing formulas to be sung by the ujita or priest that chants; the Atharva Veda, a collection of spells and incantations, apauruṣeya charms and speculative hymns. The individual verses contained in these compilations are known as mantras. Some selected Vedic mantras are still recited at prayers, religious functions and other auspicious occasions in contemporary Hinduism. The various Indian philosophies and sects have taken differing positions on the Vedas. Schools of Indian philosophy which cite the Vedas as their scriptural authority are classified as orthodox, astika. Other traditions, notably Buddhism and Jainism, which did not regard the Vedas as authorities are referred to by traditional Hindu texts as heterodox, or non-orthodox, nastika, schools. In addition to Buddhism and Jainism, Sikhism and Brahmaism, many non-Brahmin Hindus in South India do not accept the authority of the Vedas. Certain South Indian Brahmin communities such as Iyengas consider the Tamil Divya Prabandham or writing of the Alva saints as equivalent to the Vedas.
Etymology and usage.
The Sanskrit word Veda knowledge, wisdom is derived from the root vid to know. This is reconstructed as being derived from the Proto-Indo-European root ved, meaning see, or know. As a noun, the word appears only in a single instance in the Rig Veda, in RV 8.19.5, translated by Griffith as ritual law. The noun is from Proto-Indo-European uidos, cognate to Greek, eidos aspect, form. Not to be confused is the homonymous first and third person singular perfect tense Veda, cognate to Greek, oida, oida I know. Root cognates a Greek idea, English wit, etc., Latin video I see, etc. In English, the term Veda is often used loosely to refer to the Saṃhitās, collection of mantras, or chants, of the four canonical Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajna Veda, Sama Veda and Atharva Veda. The Sanskrit term Veda as a common noun means knowledge, but can also be used to refer to fields of study unrelated to liturgy or ritual, for example in Agada Veda medical science, Saya Veda science of agriculture, or Sarpa Veda science of snakes, already found in the early Upanishads. Veda means with evil knowledge, ignorant.
Chronology.
The Vedas are among the oldest sacred texts. The Saṃhitās date to roughly 1500–1000 BCE, and the Circum-Vedic texts, as well as the redaction of the Saṃhitās, date to c. 1000–500 BCE, resulting in a Vedic period, spanning the mid-2nd to mid-1st millennium BCE, or the Late Bronze Age and the Iron Age. The Vedic period reaches its peak only after the composition of the mantra texts, with the establishment of the various shlokas all over northern India which annotated the mantra Saṃhitās with Brahmana discussions of their meaning, and reaches its end in the age of Buddha and Panini and the rise of the Mahajanapadas. Archaeologically, northern black polished ware. Michael Witzel gives a time span of c. 1500 BCE to c. 500–400 BCE. Witzel makes special reference to the Near Eastern Mitanni material of the 14th century BCE, the only epigraphic record of Indo-Aryan contemporary to the Rig Vedic period. He gives 150 BCE, Patanjali, as a terminus antiquum for all Vedic Sanskrit literature, and 1200 BCE, the early Iron Age, as terminus postquum for the Atharva Veda. Transmission of texts in the Vedic period was by oral tradition alone. preserved with precision with the help of elaborate mnemonic techniques. A literary tradition set in only in post-Vedic times, after the rise of Buddhism in the Maurya period, perhaps earliest in the Kanva recension of the Yajna Veda about the 1st century BCE. However, oral tradition predominated until c. 1000 CE. Due to the ephemeral nature of the manuscript material, birch bark or palm leaves, surviving manuscripts rarely surpass an age of a few hundred years. The Benares Sanskrit University has a Rig Veda manuscript of the mid-14th century. However, there are a number of older Veda manuscripts in Nepal belonging to the Vajrayanite tradition that are dated from the 11th century onwards.
Categories of Vedic texts.
The term Vedic texts is used in two distinct meanings. Texts composed in Vedic Sanskrit during the Vedic period, Iron Age India, any text considered as connected to the Vedas, or a corollary of the Vedas.
Vedic Sanskrit corpus.
The corpus of Vedic Sanskrit texts includes the Saṃhitās, Sanskrit Saṃhita, collection, are collections of metric texts, mantras. There are 4 Vedic Saṃhitās, the Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajna Veda, and Atharva Veda, most of which are available in several recensions, Saukha. In some contexts, the term Veda is used to refer to these Saṃhitās. This is the oldest layer of Vedic texts, apart from the Rig Vedic hymns, which were probably essentially complete by 1200 BCE, dating to c. the 12th to 10th centuries BCE. The complete corpus of Vedic mantras is collected in Bloomfield's Vedic Concordance, 1907, consists of some 89,000 padas, metric feet, of which 72,000 occur in the 4 Saṃhitās. The Brahmanas are prose texts that discuss, in technical fashion, the solemn sacrificial rituals as well as comment on their meaning in many connected themes. Each of the Brahmanas is associated with one of the Saṃhitās or its recensions. The Brahmanas may either form separate texts or can be partly integrated into the text of the Saṃhitās. They may also include the Aranyakas and Upanishads. The Aranyakas, wilderness texts, or forest treaties, were composed by people who meditated in the woods as recluses and are the third part of the Vedas. The texts contain discussions and interpretations of dangerous rituals, to be studied outside the settlement, and various sorts of additional materials. It is frequently read in secondary literature. Some of the older Mukha Upanishads, Haidaranyaka, Chandogya, Katha, certain sutra literature, that is the Shruti Sutras and the Khya Sutras. The Shruti Sutras, regarded as belonging to the smṛti, are late Vedic in language and content, thus forming part of the Vedic Sanskrit corpus. The composition of the Shruti and Grhya Sutras, c. 6th century BCE, marks the end of the Vedic period, and at the same time the beginning of the flourishing of the circum-Vedic scholarship of Vedanga, introducing the early flowering of classical Sanskrit literature in the Mauryan and Gupta periods. While production of Brahmanas and Aranyakas ceases with the end of the Vedic period, there is a large number of Upanishads composed after the end of the Vedic period. While most of the 10 Mukha Upanishads can be considered to date to the Vedic or Mahājanapāda period, most of the 108 Upanishads of the full Muktika canon date to the Common Era. The Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads often interpret the polytheistic and ritualistic Saṃhitās in philosophical and metaphorical ways to explore abstract concepts such as the Absolute, Brahman, and the soul or the self, Atman, introducing Vedanta philosophy, one of the major trends of later Hinduism. The Vedic Sanskrit corpus is the scope of a Vedic word concordance, Vedikapada Kosa, prepared from 1930 under Vishtha Bandhu, and published in 5 volumes in 1935 to 1965. Its scope extends to about 400 texts, including the entire Vedic Sanskrit corpus besides some sub-Vedic texts. A revised edition, extending to about 1,800 pages, was published in 1973 to 1976.
Shruti literature.
The texts considered Vedic in the sense of corollaries of the Vedas is less clearly defined, and may include numerous post-Vedic texts such as Upanishads or sutra literature. These texts are by many Hindu sects considered to be śruti, Sanskrit, smṛti. The herd, divinely revealed like the Vedas themselves. Texts not considered to be śruti are known as smṛti, Sanskrit, smṛti. The remembered, of human origin. This indigenous system of categorization was adopted by Max Muller and, while it is subject to some debate, it is still widely used. As Axel Michaels explains, the Upanishads are largely philosophical works in dialogue form. They discuss questions of nature, philosophy and the fate of the soul, and contain some mystic and spiritual interpretations of the Vedas. For long, they have been regarded as their putative end and essence, and are thus known as Vedanta, the end of the Vedas. Taken together, they are the basis of the Vedanta school.
Vedic schools or recensions.
Study of the extensive body of Vedic texts has been organized into a number of different schools or branches, Sanskrit Saukha, literally branch, or limb, each of which specialized in learning certain texts. Multiple recensions are known for each of the Vedas, and each Vedic text may have a number of schools associated with it. Elaborate methods for preserving the text were based on memorizing by heart instead of writing. Specific techniques for parsing and reciting the texts were used to assist in the memorization process. See also, Vedic chant. Prodigious energy was expended by ancient Indian culture in ensuring that these texts were transmitted from generation to generation with inordinate fidelity. For example, memorization of the sacred Vedas included up to 11 forms of recitation of the same text. The texts were subsequently proofread by comparing the different recited versions. Forms of recitation included the Jatapatha, literally mesh recitation, in which every two adjacent words in the text were first recited in their original order, then repeated in the reverse order, and finally repeated again in the original order. That these methods have been effective is testified to by the preservation of the most ancient Indian religious text, the Rig Veda, as redacted into a single text during the Brahmana period, without any variant readings.
4 Vedas.
The canonical division of the Vedas is fourfold: Turiya, viz. Rig Veda, RV, Yajna, YV, with the main division TS versus, Samaveda, SV, Atharvaveda, AV. Of these, the first three were the principal original division, also called Trari Vidya, that is, the triple sacred science of reciting hymns, RV, performing sacrifices, YV, and chanting, SV. This triplicity is so introduced in the Brahmanas, Shpi, Abhya and others, but the Rig Veda is the older work of the three from which the other two borrow, next to their own independent yajnas, sorcery and speculative mantras. Thus, the mantras are properly of three forms: 1. Rik, which are verses of praise in meter, and intended for loud recitation. 2. Yajnas, which are in prose, and intended for recitation in lower voice at sacrifices. 3. Saman, which are in meter, and intended for singing at the Soma ceremonies. The Yajna, Samaveda and Atharvaveda are independent collections of mantras and hymns intended as manuals for the Advaru, Ujat and Brahman priests respectively. The Atharvaveda is the fourth Veda. Its status has occasionally been ambiguous, probably due to its use in sorcery and healing. However, it contains very old materials in early Vedic language. Manusmrti, which often speaks of the three Vedas, calling them Trayam Brahma Sanatanam, the triple eternal Veda. The Atharvaveda, like the Rig Veda, is a collection of original incantations, and other materials borrowing relatively little from the Rig Veda. It has no direct relation to the solemn smṛti sacrifices, except for the fact that the mostly silent Brahman priest observes the procedures and uses Atharvaveda mantras to heal it when mistakes have been made. Its recitation also produces long life, cures diseases, or affects the ruin of enemies. Each of the four Vedas consists of the metrical mantra or Saṃhitā and the prose Brahmana part, giving discussions and directions for the detail of the ceremonies at which the mantras were to be used and explanations of the legends connected with the mantras and rituals. Both these portions are termed śruti, which tradition says to have been heard but not composed or written down by men. Each of the 4 Vedas seems to have passed to numerous shlokas or schools, giving rise to various recensions of the text. They each have an index or anvagramani, the principal work of this kind being the general index or Zavanvagramani.
Rig Veda.
The Rig Veda Saṃhitā is the oldest extant Indic text. It is a collection of 1,028 Vedic Sanskrit hymns and 10,600 verses in all, organized into 10 books, Sanskrit, mandalas. The hymns are dedicated to Rig Vedic deities. The books were composed by poets from different priestly groups over a period of several centuries, commonly dated to the period of roughly the second half of the second millennium BCE, the early Vedic period, in the Punjab, Sapta Sindhu region of the Indian subcontinent. There are strong linguistic and cultural similarities between the Rig Veda and the early Iranian Avesta, deriving from the Proto-Indo-Iranian times, often associated with the Andronovo culture. The earliest horse-drawn chariots were found at Andronovo sites in the Sintashta Petrova cultural area near the Ural Mountains and date to c. 2000 BCE. Rig Veda manuscripts were selected for inscription in UNESCO's Memory of the World Register in 2007.
Yajna.
The Yajna Saṃhitā consists of archaic prose mantras and also in part of verses borrowed and adapted from the Rig Veda. Its purpose was practical, in that each mantra must accompany an action in sacrifice but, unlike the Samaveda, it was compiled to apply to all sacrificial rites, not merely the Somaja. There are 2 major groups of recensions of this Veda, known as the Black, Krishna, and White, Shukla, Yajurveda, Krishna and Shukla Yajurveda respectively. While White Yajurveda separates the Saṃhitā from its Brahmana, the Shatapatha Brahmana, the Black Yajurveda intersperses the Saṃhitā with Brahmana commentary. Of the Black Yajurveda 4 major recensions survive, Metrayani, Katha, Kapisthala Katha, Taittiriya.
Samaveda.
The Samaveda Saṃhitā, from Saman, the term for a melody applied to metrical hymn or song of praise, consists of 1549 stanzas, taken almost entirely, except for 78 stanzas, from the Rig Veda. Like the Rig Vedic stanzas in the Yajurveda, the Samans have been changed and adapted for use in singing. Some of the Rig Vedic verses are repeated more than once. Including repetitions, there are a total of 1875 verses numbered in the Samaveda recension translated by Griffith. 2 major recensions remain today, the Kalthumarayanayana and the Jaimaniya. Its purpose was liturgical, as the repertoire of the Ujat or singer priests who took part in the sacrifice.
Atharvaveda.
The Atharvaveda Saṃhitā is the text belonging to the Atharvan and Angirasa poets. It has 760 hymns, and about 160 of the hymns are in common with the Rig Veda. Most of the verses are metrical, but some sections are in prose. It was compiled around 900 BCE, although some of its material may go back to the time of the Rig Veda, and some parts of the Atharvaveda are older than the Rig Veda though not in linguistic form. The Atharvaveda is preserved in 2 recensions, the Papalada and Saunaka. According to Apt it had 9 schools, shlokas. The Papalada text, which exists in a Kashmir and an Orissa version, is longer than the Saunaka one. It is only partially printed in its 2 versions and remains largely untranslated. Unlike the other 3 Vedas, the Atharvaveda Veda has less connection with sacrifice. Its first part consists chiefly of spells and incantations, concerned with protection against demons and disaster, spells for the healing of diseases, for long life and for various desires or aims in life. The second part of the text contains speculative and philosophical hymns. The Atharvaveda is a comparatively late extension of the 3 Vedas connected to priestly sacrifice to a canon of 4 Vedas. This may be connected to an extension of the sacrificial rite from involving 3 types of priest to the inclusion of the Brahman overseeing the ritual. The Atharvaveda is concerned with the material world or world of man and in this respect differs from the other 3 Vedas. Atharva Veda also sanctions the use of force, in particular circumstances, and similarly this point is a departure from the three other Vedas.
Brahmanas.
The mystical notions surrounding the concept of the one Veda that would flower in Vedantic philosophy have their roots already in Brahmana literature, for example in the Shatapatha Brahmana. The Vedas are identified with Brahman, the universal principle, SBM 10.1.1.8, 10.2.4.6. Backspeech is called the mother of the Vedas, SBM 6.5.3.4, 10.5.5.1. The knowledge of the Vedas is endless, compared to them, human knowledge is like mere handfuls of dirt, TB 3.10.11.3-5. The universe itself was originally encapsulated in the three Vedas, SBM 10.4.2.22 has Prajapati reflecting that truly, all beings are in the triple Veda.
Vedanta.
While contemporary traditions continued to maintain Vedic ritualism, smṛti, Mimamsa, Vedanta renounced all ritualism and radically reinterpreted the notion of Veda in purely philosophical terms. The association of the three Vedas with the Bhubhuvasva mantra is found in the Aitareyanaranyaka, Bhu as the Rig Veda, Bhuva as the Yajna Veda, Sva as the Sama Veda, 1.3.2. The Upanishads reduce the essence of the Vedas further, to the syllable aum. Thus, the Katha Upanishad has
In post-Vedic literature, Vedanga.
6 technical subjects related to the Vedas are traditionally known as Vedanga limbs of the Veda. VSAP defines this group of works as these subjects are treated in sutra literature dating from the end of the Vedic period to Mauryan times, seeing the transition from late Vedic Sanskrit to classical Sanskrit. The 6 subjects of Vedanga are phonetics, Siksha, ritual, kalpa, grammar, Vyakarana, etymology, Nirukta, meter, chandas, astronomy, Jyotisa.
Parasista.
Parasista supplement, appendix is the term applied to various ancillary works of Vedic literature, dealing mainly with details of ritual and elaborations of the texts logically and chronologically prior to them, the Saṃhitās, Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Sutras. Naturally classified with the Veda to which each pertains, Parasista works exist for each of the 4 Vedas. However, only the literature associated with the Atharva Veda is extensive. The Asvalayana Grhya Parasista is a very late text associated with the Rig Veda canon. The Gopala Grhya Parasista is a short metrical text of 2 chapters, with 113 and 95 verses respectively. The Katha Parasistas, ascribed to Katyayana, consist of 18 works enumerated self-referentially in the 5th of the series, the Karana Veda, and the Katyayana Smṛti Sutra Parasista. The Ksna Yajna Veda has 3 parasistas: the Apastambhotra Parasista, which is also found as the second prasna of the Satayajna Smṛti Sutra, the Varaha Smṛti Sutra Parasista. For the Atharva Veda, there are 79 works, collected as 72 distinctly named parasistas.
Puranas.
A traditional view given in the Vishnu Purana, likely dating to the Gupta period, attributes the current arrangement of 4 Vedas to the mythical sage Vedavyasa. Puranic tradition also postulates a single original Veda that, in varying accounts, was divided into 3 or 4 parts. According to the Vishnu Purana, 3.2.18, 3.3.4 etc. the original Veda was divided into 4 parts, and further fragmented into numerous shlokas, by Lord Vishnu in the form of Vyasa, in the Dvapara Yuga. The Vala Purana, section 60, recounts a similar division by Vyasa, at the urging of Brahma. The Bhagavata Purana, 12.6.37, traces the origin of the primeval Veda to the syllable and says that it was divided into 4 at the start of Dvapara Yuga, because men had declined in age, virtue and understanding. In a differing account, Bhagavata Purana, 9.14.43, attributes the division of the primeval Veda, into 3 parts to the monarch Pauravas at the beginning of Treta Yuga. The Mahabharata, Santipava 13088 also mentions the division of the Veda into three in Treta Yuga.
Upaveda.
The term Upaveda, applied knowledge, is used in traditional literature to designate the subjects of certain technical works. Lists of what subjects are included in this class differ among sources. The Shuranavada mentions four Upavedas. Medicine, Ayurveda, associated with the Rig Veda; archery, Dhanurveda, associated with the Yajurveda; music and sacred dance, Gandharva Veda, associated with the Samaveda; military science, Shastra, associated with the Atharva Veda. But Sushruta and Bhavaprakasha mention Ayurveda as an Upaveda of the Atharva Veda. Sthapatya-Veda, architecture, Shilpa Shastras, arts and crafts, are mentioned as fourth Upaveda according to later sources.
Fifth and other Vedas.
Some post-Vedic texts, including the Mahabharata, the Natyasastra and certain Puranas, refer to themselves as the fifth Veda. The earliest reference to such a fifth Veda is found in the Chandogya Upanishad. Dravida Veda is a term for canonical Tamil Bhakti texts. Other texts such as the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedanta Sutras are considered śruti or Vedic by some Hindu denominations but not universally within Hinduism. The Bhakti movement, and Gaudiya Vaishnavism in particular, extended the term Veda to include the Sanskrit epics and Vaishnavite devotional texts such as the Pancaratra.
Western Indology.
The study of Sanskrit in the West began in the 17th century. In the early 19th century, Arthur Schopenhauer drew attention to Vedic texts, specifically the Upanishads. The importance of Vedic Sanskrit for Indo-European studies was also recognized in the early 19th century. English translations of the Saṃhitās were published in the later 19th century, in the Sacred Books of the East series edited by Muller between 1879 and 1910. Ralph T. H. Griffith also presented English translations of the four Saṃhitās, published 1889 to 1899. Voltaire regarded Vedas to be exceptional. He remarked that,